pays only lip service to her desire for equality, and overrides her wishes without a qualm. She also has to deal with her mother-in-law, the formidable Empress Matilda, whose husband Geoffrey had once been Eleanor's lover. I hope you've managed to work that out. Eleanor's smile was becoming rather fixed as, her hand still on his, Henry led her into the great hall of the magnificent royal palace at Rouen. This was the chief residence of the Empress Matilda, and it was as grandly appointed as Eleanor would have expected. Matilda herself was very grand too. There were 2 thrones on the dais, and she was standing erect and proud before one of them, a tall, regal woman in her early 50s, wearing a purple robe girded with gold, and a snowy white wimple held in place with a circlet studded with amethysts. Her face was still handsome, despite its hawk-like nose, and the faint lines that bore witness to the many disappointments she'd suffered in life. As Eleanor drew near, she saw there could be no doubting that Matilda was Henry's mother, or that she was regarding her new daughter-in-law with undisguised disapproval. Eleanor sank into a deep curtsy. "Welcome to Rouen, madame," the Emperor said in a cool voice. "Please rise." She turned to Henry. "My son," she said, and raised her face for the expected dutiful kiss. "Mother, where is Eleanor to sit?" Henry muttered, ignoring her and jerking his head at the 2 thrones. "I will have a chair brought," the Empress said. She signalled to her steward. "She means to slight me," Eleanor thought. "She wishes to show me who is mistress here. She knew I was coming, yet she conveniently forgot to have a 3rd throne set ready." Aloud she said, smiling, "My Lady Empress, I am most happy to meet you, especially on this great occasion. You must be overjoyed that Henry's invasion of England has led to such a successful conclusion, and that he is now to be king when King Stephen dies." The Empress bristled faintly. Was Eleanor criticising? Was she implying that Henry had succeeded where she, for all her efforts, had failed? "He has indeed done well in championing and vindicating my cause, for England was always rightfully mine," she declared frostily. "But I happily cede my claim to him, for I will never return to that God-forsaken island." And nor does she, mercifully, even when Henry becomes King of England in 1154, and he and Eleanor travel to Westminster for their triumphant coronation. Eleanor was to bear Henry 9 children, 6 of them sons, and the duties of motherhood kept her occupied for much of her time. As Queen, Henry allowed her to exercise considerable power, although it wasn't long before his new friend and Chancellor, Thomas Becket, supplanted her in the King's councils. Becket was everywhere these days, with an elegant finger in every pie. Eleanor still found it hard to credit that this hitherto unknown and relatively lowly fellow could so quickly have been advanced so high. It was just 6 short months ago that Archbishop Theobald had presented his most promising clerk to the King at the Christmas court, and in that moment Eleanor had seen Henry take an instant liking to Thomas Becket, witnessed the rapport that had immediately sprung up between the 2 men, and felt faintly uneasy when the King unhesitatingly raised the newcomer to his feet and approved his appointment as Chancellor almost at once. "But you hardly know this man," she ventured to remonstrate later. "I take him on Theobald's recommendation," Henry answered reasonably. "He is a shrewd judge of character." She'd gradually become painfully aware that she was being supplanted, that her husband no longer sought her counsel first, and that he was spending more time with Becket than he was with her. On the surface, all was well between her and Henry. They were lovers and friends still, but she sensed more strongly than ever now that in every way that counted, Becket was her rival. There'd been that crucial matter of patronage. From the time Eleanor had first come to England, she'd been deluged by petitions and requests from those who knew her to be influential with the King. But now her power, that power to change the lives of others for the better, was under threat. Becket had come upon her as she'd sat with her clerks, going through the latest pleas from her petitioners, and in the fleeting second before he made his bow, she'd seen the contempt in his eyes. "What can I do for you, my Lord Chancellor?" she'd asked courteously. "I think, Madam the Queen, that it is more a case of what I can do for you," he'd answered. "With your leave, I will look after these petitions." She was shocked. outraged. The petitions were addressed to her. It was her privilege as queen to deal with them. How dare this upstart deacon insult her so? Even the clerks were gawping at Becket's presumption. Fury blazed in Eleanor's eyes as she rose from her chair. "My Lord Chancellor, you are new to your office, and quite obviously have much to learn. You will not be aware that these petitions are meant for the king, and they've been sent to me, his queen, by right, so that I can persuade him to grant them." Becket merely smiled and held out his hand. "On the contrary, madam, I think you will find the king wishes me to deal with them. If you would like to ask him, I'm sure he will confirm that." She was speechless. Never had she been so slighted. "Leave them here," she said. "I command it. I will indeed speak with the king, and now you have my leave to go." 6 years later, Henry makes an unwilling Becket Archbishop of Canterbury, in the hope that Becket will support him in his church reforms. But Becket, who transformed overnight from a man who loved luxury into an ascetic, proves obdurate, and a long and bitter quarrel ensues, to which Eleanor is a weary and helpless witness. For 6 years, Becket continues to defy his king. But it's not just Becket who's Eleanor's rival and torment. Shortly before the birth of her last child, John, she seeks refuge at Woodstock Palace with disastrous consequences. They had been making for Oxford, hoping to get there by dusk, before the snow fell, but their battle with the elements had delayed them, and the Queen now had no choice but to order that they divert to Woodstock for the night. This royal hunting lodge was a favourite of hers, and what she needed right now was a roaring fire, warming broth, a feather bed, and the ministrations of her women. As the little procession drew to a standstill, Eleanor parted the leather curtains of her litter, allowed her assistants to help her to her feet, and then gaped in astonishment. For Woodstock now boasted a fair tower of the finest yellow stone. And what was more surprising was what lay before the tower, nestling within the curtain walls. It was some kind of enclosed garden, indeed the most curious of pleasaunces, and it certainly hadn't been there when Eleanor last visited. Had Henry gone to the trouble of ordering it to be planted for her for some future visit? And that tower, was that for her too? She soon saw that the pleasaunce was in fact a labyrinth, laid out in a circular design with young yews and briars, a paved path disappearing into its depths. The maze wasn't large, but it looked enticing, even magical, and not a little sinister in the light of the torches gathered by her people against the deepening dusk. Suddenly a door opened, and the steward materialized breathlessly out of the darkness. His face was red, his manner flustered. "Lady, welcome, welcome," he cried, bowing hastily. "We had no idea you were coming. I will make all ready. I pray you, come in and get warm." He indicated Eleanor should go before him into the royal lodging, but she swept on. "In a moment, I thank you, but first I have a mind to see that impressive new tower," she told him. His face blanched. "Madam, I should not advise it. It's unfinished and may not be safe." "Someone is up there." Eleanor pointed to a light in the window and made for the studded wooden door at the base of the tower. "My lady," the steward protested, but she ignored him. "Open the door," she commanded. What Eleanor finds in that tower shocks her to the core, and there are further shocks to come. In 1170, after hearing a drunken and distraught Henry call for someone to rid him of Becket, this turbulent priest, 4 knights leave Normandy, bent on committing an atrocity for which the king will later twice do abject penance.